and they paged me over the intercom saying, "Leslie, you've got a phone call." And my
Oh.
heart just stopped. I thought, oh no. So I reach into my pocket and I can't find the napkin. I can't find my notes. And I go crazy. I just thought, I just go blank. I don't know what to say. And I go straight to the phone. I think, oh, hopefully it's my parents or somebody else that's calling me. And I just, my hands are trembling. I pick up the phone in the lobby and she says, "Hello, is this Leslie?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "This is Carol. You left me a note." And Pastor Chris, I have no idea what on earth possessed me to say this. I didn't know what to say. I just said, "What would your mother say if you married an Indian?" Yeah, exactly.
In today's episode, we meet Leslie. This is going to be a really different episode. I know you're going to love it. A young man that when he came to the United States, he felt small. He felt that he didn't fit in. But listening to God, following what God was calling him, he became a great leader. With you, welcome to a special edition of Tea Talks. Elder Louis, you have no idea how excited I am about this little interview here. It's been a little while that I heard your story and I was like, we need to share this. So thank you so much for taking the time and accepting this invitation.
You're very welcome. It's an honor for me to be here, just to share it. I don't know that I have anything special to say, but I'm happy to be here and share how God's guided my life.
Yes. No, I know you have a lot of special things to share. Let's start from the very beginning.
Okay.
How was growing up? How was your family? Tell me a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, my mom and dad, my heritage home is in India. Mm-hmm. My mom and dad graduated from Spicer Memorial College, which is a college in the north western part of India. But then they came to Sri Lanka, which used to be called Ceylon. And my dad worked for an American firm there, which eventually moved to Singapore. And then he started working for the church. My dad was a pastor. He also was a teacher. My mother was a church school teacher all her life. But they worked on the island of Ceylon, and I was born there. So they were married there. As soon as they left India, came to the Ceylon is only an island. It's about the size of the state of Rhode Island, and it's a small island. But in the central part of the island are mountains. And then there was a school there that I grew up on, and there's a little town there called Kandy. And
Kandy.
And actually, when I used to be a teacher, kids call me the Candy Man. So
that is too funny.
But it's really spelled Kandy. But I was born in Kandy, and I grew up there. Most of my boyhood days, until I came to the United States, was on the island of Ceylon. I'd always, on holidays and special occasions, we would go back to India to see my grandparents and my cousins and, my aunts and uncles and that kind of thing. But India is my heritage home, but my boyhood home where I grew up was the island of Ceylon.
How old were you when you came here?
I came here when I was 11 years old. I was almost 12, but I was 11 years old when I came here.
Okay. How about your spiritual background? What was the religious upbringing?
I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents, all my life I've been a Seventh-day Adventist, but I grew up in a Christian home. My parents were very, very faithful in having worship in the morning and worship in the evening. And so I grew up in a home that really emphasized the importance of having a daily walk with Christ. Dad would always read a passage from the Bible. I have a funny story to tell you about this, because I sometimes you think kids don't listen because, you think, oh, okay, they kind of tune you out, because Dad's just reading the Bible, and it's just kind of monotonous. It's just, okay, here we go. But it's amazing how things stand out in your mind, because I remember this passage of scripture, where Dad was reading For as lightning comes from the east to the west, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. Well, one day I was standing outside, and whenever Dad finished, the reading of Scripture, and we had our morning worship, we had our prayer, I would go out, I would feed the chickens, and after I fed the chickens, my other responsibility as a little kid was to check the banana trees because we had lots of monkeys, and so my job was to check
like a scarecrow type of thing.
Yeah. I had to check the banana trees so that the monkeys weren't getting to them, and if they were turning ripe, I had to come and tell Dad, because there were rows of banana trees, and I'd keep looking down there. Well, one day I went out there to check, feed the chickens, and I'm looking up into the sky, and I see this thing, and I'm just so shocked at what I'm seeing, and I'm saying, Dad, you got to come here. And, dads don't always respond every time kids call, but my dad, I said, Dad, you got to come here. Jesus is coming. And I did get my dad's attention. He came out and looked into the sky, and he put his arm around my shoulder, and he said, Son, that's not Jesus coming. That is a jet plane crossing the sky.
Oh, wow.
Well, the fumes from the jet plane were lighted up by the rising sun and silhouetted against the coconut palms. Okay. And I thought it was that passage of Scripture that Dad read.
Wow.
And so that passage of Scripture just resonated so well in my heart that I just thought, here it is. It's the real thing.
This is it.
And so, but I just, I just appreciate it so much. My mother was an amazing woman of prayer, and she taught me more than anybody else the importance of prayer and how to pray to God as a friend. And so I grew up in a very spiritual home, and I thank God for the parents who are both resting now in Jesus, but but I thank God for them. Yeah.
How was it with your extended family? Were they Christians too?
My parents grew up from a Catholic background, so especially on my mom's side, most of them remained Catholic. The more immediate family became Seventh-day Adventists, but I would say that the majority of my family were Christians. They, whether they were Catholic or Protestant, they were all Christians. And
that is a little surprising because when you think of India, you don't exactly think of Christians. So right. I was just wondering if you had any influence of other religions as you were growing up.
I did not, but my dad tells me the story of the heritage of how that happened because, generations ago, there was a couple that came. They were Hindus, and they came to this little South Indian village, and she could not have a baby. And so they told her, I said, well, you've tried everything. You've tried to go to all the Hindu gods and pray to the Hindu gods about having a baby, and you have not, you've had no success. But I understand there's a priest here in town, a Catholic priest who will pray for you, and if you and he'll pray for you, and maybe you'll have a baby then. Well, they went to the Catholic priest, and the priest prayed for this couple, and she had a baby, and as a result of that, they became Roman Catholics, and they embraced the Christian faith, and so that's how they eventually became, Christians. My parents, they read a lot of books. My grandparents were fluent in Tamil, which is the South Indian language, and it's also spoken on the island of Sri Lanka. But they also, and I keep saying Sri Lanka, but it was Ceylon when I was growing up there, but it's Sri Lanka today. But my parents and my grandparents, they grew up learning, knowing Tamil fluently, but they also spoke English fluently.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
It was really almost like a status thing, that if you went to school, you had to learn English because then you would become a success in life. If you didn't know English, you were kind of limited in what you were able to do and what careers you could follow. That's why my dad was employed by an American firm in Sri Lanka when he graduated from college. So
it's interesting because in Brazil it's like that too. If you want to be somebody in life, you need to learn English. Sometimes English and Spanish.
Right.
But we didn't take that serious. Yeah, I didn't learn English until I came to the United States. Even though I went, like parents that want their kids to be somebody in life, they would put like in a private school to learn English, like in the afternoon or something. But Brazilians, we just speak Portuguese. That's it. You know, unless you really. It's not like Indians. Most of the Indians that I meet, they come from India. They already speak English. You know? That wasn't our case. Okay, so you grew up pretty much in a beautiful Christian household with Christian parents.
Yeah.
What was you growing up as far as, because one thing is your parents' religion.
Yeah.
Did you ever had moments where you start questioning, is this really what I believe? Is this really like just something my parents are pushing on me? Do you ever had moments of doubts?
You know, I'm sure I must have had questions about different things that were values that my parents had. And, you know, it's typical for teenagers to, argue about things or debate about things, but overall, I've always, and it was different because my brother and my sister and I all grew up in the same home. My brother walked a very different path. He was, but I don't know. I was the eldest, child in the family. And even though there were certain things that I questioned and certain practices that I questioned, I know that one thing that, my parents were very, very strict about, he says, you do not go to the movie theaters. The movie theater's a bad place, and the first time I went to a movie theater, I thought I was going to go to hell, for that.
Hell was going to open up right there and then suck you up.
So that's the way I thought. Oh man, I have committed the worst thing, But overall, I've always loved God. I've never questioned my love for God. Even when I was in high school, even when I was a teenager, and people always nominated me to be pastor of the class or whatever.
So you always had that in you.
I always had that in me. Mm-hmm. Definitely far from being perfect.
Nobody is.
Nobody is. My dad and I would get into these little arguments about different things, but I have always had a love for God. And I think that there were times when I just wondered, well, where is God in all of this? In other words, where's my life going to be? Especially after my family moved to the United States, I was very young. I told you that I was 11 years old when I came to the United States. Well, I was in the 8th grade when I came to the United States. And I was repeating the 8th grade a second time, not because I failed, but because the school year in Sri Lanka went from January to December with breaks in the middle, because we don't have a summer break there. It's always summer there.
That's how in Brazil too. So every kid that comes here from Brazil, they pretty much get held back 1 year.
Yeah. So it's like it's a 12-month school year with breaks throughout there. Well, my family came here in August. In fact, we just celebrated 60 years.
Yes.
And, of being here in America. And after coming here, my mother said, you're so young compared to all the 8th graders here. And so, most of the 8th graders were 13 or getting close to 14, and I was 11. And I did fine. I didn't really have any struggles academically, but socially, I was really a misfit. I did not fit in. And the kids, I had a hard time.
That's actually where I was going next. I wanted to ask you, what were the greatest challenges that you felt in your teen years or young adult years, especially when you mentioned that you came here at 11? That's the first thing that came to my mind. So why don't you get into that? Like, what were the struggles that you were feeling at this time?
I think I just felt like I didn't fit. The
cultural shock.
Yeah, and you know how, you've heard that saying, of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's a bunch of nonsense, because I thought I had dreamed, America was like the next thing to heaven, And I had dreamed that I would come to this land. And I had American friends in Sri Lanka. And they were great friends, and they were wonderful friends. In fact, people claim that I don't really have a strong Indian accent.
No, you don't.
And one of the reasons for that is because I grew up with one of my best friends from America. His name was Peter Beck, and I would sit there and I'd watch his mouth, and I'd say, I am going to talk just like Peter, and I would mimic him until everybody on the campus of the school that I went to said, hey, come watch Leslie. He can talk just like an American, and so it became kind of the entertainment of the school. But then so I dreamed of America as this great place, and I was going to have friends like Peter. When I came here, it was completely different.
Not like that.
It was not like that. Here was this young kid, short, didn't fit in, the bigger 8th graders, and throughout most of my early high school years, I felt really kind of out of place. I just did not fit in. And there were some very unkind things that, people said, I remember one kid actually in class, in the middle of class, in front of about 30 students, stand up and say, you are the ugliest kid I have ever seen. And, everybody else was laughing and I was so crushed.
Horrible.
And so, I know we'll probably get to this conversation later on, but that I carried that with me for many, many years. And
it does.
Some of
it does scar us.
Yeah, some of the things that were said about me, and some of, let me give you an example. One of the students that I went to school with said, I bet you when you get out of the bathwater, it all turns brown, doesn't it? And so they were all laughing, and I'm sitting here saying, wow, I thought I was coming to this wonderful country where I was going to have a lot of friends. And, I don't have a lot of friends.
And you find the prejudice, the racism.
Yeah.
And I am sure, it's not like America doesn't have racism anymore.
Yeah.
But I think we have come a long way. We are a lot better than it was before. I can imagine what you went through.
By the time I became a junior and a senior in high school, things changed because I was so good at my studies and everybody wanted help from me.
The grades.
And so whenever there was somebody was struggling with balancing a chemical equation, they'd say, go to Leslie, he can help you with that, And so it became my inroad to kind of make connections, because people said, Leslie is, good at that, or he can do that. But that was the way that I, gained any kind of status among my classmates.
So things got a little better.
It got a little bit better, but I always knew where I stood. Mm-hmm. They were always friends of mine. But I always, they looked at me as lesser than, and
it's always that feeling like I am not really one of them.
Exactly.
It's this is a feeling that I still have. It's like the best thing is for you to never leave your country, because once you leave your country, you'll never fit anywhere. Because it's like I go back home and I'm not Brazilian. Yeah. The Brazilians immediately she's not, because she knows how to speak English or something like that. Then I come here, Americans are like, immediately when I start talking, because I never lost my accent, immediately when I start talking, they're like, she's not exactly American, So there's always that feeling that, where do I fit in? I think that the good news is we fit in heaven. That citizenship is ours. We know that.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Okay, so let's move a little bit forward.
Okay.
How about university?
Well, I went when my senior class, was trying
I'm trying to get to the point where you meet your wife, right? Because that is the story that I'm waiting for.
Yeah, when
things got much better.
I went to high school in Maryland.
Okay.
And my senior class couldn't decide where they wanted to go. They didn't want to go to New York City. They didn't want to go to Washington, D.C. But my chemistry teacher had a farm. He had a ranch in Salem, South Carolina. Mm. He said, listen, you guys can't decide where you want to go. He said, I tell you what, there's this place in Salem, South Carolina that I own. It's a ranch. The only problem is you guys are going to have to sleep in the barn. You girls are going to have to sleep in the ranch house. You want to do that?
So wait, that was for what? High school?
That was for high school.
Okay.
And so we said, and this was our senior year. And so we said, you know what, that sounds like fun, because he said that he had some rifles, and he says, you guys can, shoot pop bottles or whatever, and you can do some, and I said, and then we could ride horses. He says, great, let's do that. I'd rather do that than go to New York City or go to Washington. And so we went there. That's my first trip to the South. And I ate grits and loved it.
That's it. I fell in love.
And I ate biscuits and gravy, and I loved it. Well, I was registered to go to a college in Lincoln, Nebraska. But then when I went there to Salem, South Carolina, one of the professors from Southern Adventist University was speaking there. And he kind of spoke to all the seniors. And they asked me where I was planning on going to college. I told them, I said, well, my parents live in Maryland, but I'm going to go to Lincoln, Nebraska. I just want to, kind of break free and, explore a different part of the United States. He said, well, that's a long way from home, Leslie. Why don't you go to Southern Adventist University? I said, where is that? And he says, it's in Tennessee. At that time, it was called Southern Missionary College, but eventually it became called Southern Adventist University today. And I said, well, I like grits and I like biscuits and gravy. I said, why not try that? So I went to Southern. And,
I like the reasoning.
Oh, well, there you go.
Very good.
Grits
reasoning.
And biscuits and gravy. There you go. So, but I decided, what, it is closer to home, and so I decided to go there, and that changed my whole life. And when I went there, I'll be very honest, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Oh, you hadn't decided what you were going to do?
No. When I started college, I kept changing my major just about every month, seems like. And finally, I got called in by the academic dean into his office and said, Leslie, in college, you don't change your major every month, okay? And I said, and his name was Mr. K.R. Davis. And I said, Mr. Davis, I have no idea what I want to do with my life. This is one of the beauties of Adventist education, of Christian education. As a professor there, as a mentor, he said, Leslie, let's pray about it. Let's ask God to direct your life. And he will. I can assure you, he will. He'll show you which path to take. So he prayed with me. I'll never forget the prayer that he prayed for me. And it meant so much to me. Nobody had ever, I can't remember ever a time when teachers prayed in classes. I went to Christian schools. But no one had ever prayed specifically with me and for me like he did.
For that specific need that you had.
Because I didn't know what direction I wanted to go with my life. Well, I didn't get some answer from the clouds or anything else like that. I didn't hear God's voice speaking or anything else like that. But it's interesting how a few months later, I was walking down the hallway of the men's dormitory, and this man looked very distinguished. He was in a suit. He comes up. He says, your name is Leslie Louis. And I thought, how do you know my name? And well, I discovered I'm the only Indian on the campus. So
not too hard.
not too hard, So he says, I have a job for you. I want you to come and be my kitchen manager. I said, I don't cook. And he says, you don't have to cook. I just need you. He says, I know you're a very organized person. I need you to be in charge of the stock, in charge of the kitchen, keep it orderly. He says, you just be in charge of the kitchen, but you won't be the cook. And I said, well, I've never been to Florida. And this is a good opportunity. I said, by then my parents had moved from Maryland to New Jersey. And I said, I don't want to go to New Jersey, and I don't have a job there. And this is a job offer. And so I said, great. I'll
I got lost a little. That's for the summer.
That's for the summer.
Got it.
Right. Mm-hmm. So this was toward the end of my first freshman year there, at Southern. And so I decided to go there. Well, I go down there to the camp and, get down there, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I said, I'm supposed to be the kitchen manager. So, the kitchen is down that way. Go down there. And so I walked in there. And a bunch of girls are looking at me like, who is this guy? I said, "Hi, I am the kitchen manager." He says, "We've been waiting for you." Says, "There's your desk." They showed me a vat, a sink just filled with dirty pots and pans. That was my job as the kitchen manager, washing dirty pots and pans.
Okay.
So that's how
So they gave a fancy name to the dishwasher.
That's right. Pot washer, pot scrubber.
Pot washer.
So anyway, I said, he had a way with words, my director. But that summer, I washed pots and pans the whole summer.
Okay.
But every time that they had a need for someone to tell a story or something else like that, they would say, "You think you can tell a story to the kids?" And I just eventually...
So that's how you discover your ability?
Yeah, I thought, I love being with kids. And I love connecting with kids. And so eventually I became, over the years, I became a counselor at the camp there in Florida. And eventually I became the boys director and the assistant director for the camp.
Oh, wow.
But it just transitioned from one thing, from pot scrubber to counselor to boys director to assistant director for the camp. And
you kept going, like the different
summers? Every summer I would go there, and I was working with the youth. But it was during those summers that God impressed me that, Leslie, you can make a difference in the lives of these kids. And it's interesting. There's one pastor that works here in the Carolinas who was, I was his counselor, and and so I meet some of these kids, all the time, that were in my cabin.
It's got to be wonderful to meet the people that you had an influence on.
Yeah, and so it's fun, and I realized that that's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to dedicate it to doing something to make a difference in the lives of young people and children.
That is awesome. So what ended up being your major?
I became, actually, I wanted to be a chaplain on a campus. So I was a religion major.
Okay.
And I was a religion major, but then I took a lot of education classes. And so I had a history minor, and I also had a secondary education minor. So,
okay.
So I was doing both of those. So I was doing education, but my primary emphasis was in religion. And so
basically the pastor teacher type of education.
Exactly. And in fact, when I did my student teaching at a high school in Georgia, I did that with being like an assistant chaplain. I did that during that last semester of my senior year in college.
Nice.
And so nice. I loved it. I thought, this is what I want to do. I never got a job doing that, but I started off, with teaching in an elementary school, eventually became a secondary teacher, and then eventually became a principal. And I said, I'll never be a principal. I don't ever want that. I don't want administration at all. God has a way of having interesting ways.
That's all you do now.
I know, that's all I do now. And I thought it's interesting how God guides your life and says, that's what you think.
I said the same thing. I never want an administration job. Guess what?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
We need to get to what the people wants to know.
Oh, okay.
How did you meet your wife?
Oh, my goodness. During my junior year, I realized, I don't know whether I'm an Indian or whether I'm an American. In India, marriages are arranged.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy. Your parents come, they say, we think this would make a good match for you.
I think we need to do another podcast just to understand that concept of being easy. Because in my concept, it's like, that's insane, but we don't have time for that. Keep going.
Well, I wasn't used to that either, because I've been in America, but I wasn't comfortable with dating either. And so, and so asking a girl out was like the worst thing. I could get up and preach a sermon before I could do that, Did
you still had a little bit of, I don't fit in?
I was getting better about that in terms of my confidence in as a, as far as getting ready to teach, getting ready to speak up front, all of that kind of stuff, I didn't have any problem with that. But in terms of relationships, especially with a companion, I wasn't sure whether that, and I thought, well, how, if I married an American, how's that going to fit with my family? If I, maybe I should go back to India. So for 1 year, I decided
So you even question go back to India because that way probably would have an arranged marriage.
Right, exactly. Okay. So I went to Newbold College for 1 year, which is in England. And while I was there, I was trying to pray about it and say, Lord, where is my home? And there were certain circumstances that took place there that I felt America's home. This is where I really want to be back. I don't, there was a time there when I felt kind of divided where it was home. On the first day that I came back to Southern, I met this girl that said, hey, you and I were in psychology class together, remember?
Okay.
Now that had been 1.5 years ago, because I'd been gone to England for a while. And I remember that very awkwardly I had asked her out for a date. Okay. But
Are you talking about 1.5 years before?
At 1.5 years before, I'd asked this girl out. And a date was just to go to church. It wasn't like to go out to eat.
Oh, okay. So you invite her to go to church.
Yeah, I invited her to go to church with me. And she said, I am going back to my home in Raleigh, North Carolina, because I don't have enough money to stay here and to finish up this year. And so I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And she says, I would love to go to church with you, but I'm leaving, But on the day she left campus, she came. It was Christmas break. This is 1.5 years ago before. And she left me a bottle of English lather as a little Christmas present. Well, I'd carried that English lather with me to England. And so I even have pictures of it on my shelf. Well, I'm coming back now. This is 1.5 years later. And I meet the same girl. And she says, hey, do you remember me from that psychology class? And she says, well, I decided I came back. I saved some money and I decided to come back, I said, I think I might like to ask this girl out. But I was so nervous, so scared. And I thought, well, how am I going to ever ask her out? Again, I asked her out once and she said, and anyway.
But she gave you a present.
But she gave me a present. So I thought, there's hope here.
Those are some signs.
There's some signs, I mean, it's been a long time,
yes.
but so I thought, I kind of did it the chicken way. I went to the women's dormitory. I wrote a little note and said, would you put this in Carol Dendy's box? That was her name. It was just a note saying, when you get a chance, give me a call. Then after I did that, I thought, that was the dumbest thing that I've ever done. What am I going to say if she calls me? And so all day long, I'd go to the cafeteria and I found a napkin and I wrote down the words. I'm very scripted on everything I do a lot of times. And so I wrote down the words. Okay, if she calls me, I'm going to say, exactly what I'm going to ask her, and ask her to go to church with me again, I had that napkin. I pulled it out during the day in my classes. I'd look at it, crumble it up. I thought, okay, I'm going to memorize this, so it's not looking like it's canned. And eventually I just thought, what am I going to do? This is the dumbest thing I've done. Well, my classes were over. I come to the men's dormitory and I go to my room, plop my books down, and they page me over the intercom saying, Leslie, you've got a phone call. And my heart just stopped. I thought, oh no. So I reach into my pocket and I can't find the napkin. I can't find my notes. And I go crazy. I just thought, I just go blank. I don't know what to say. And I go straight to the phone. I think, oh, hopefully it's my parents or somebody else that's calling me. And I just, my hands are trembling. I pick up the phone in the lobby and she says, hello, is this Leslie? I said, yeah. She says, this is Carol. You left me a note. And Pastor Chris, I have no idea what on earth possessed me to say this. I didn't know what to say. I just said, what would your mother say if you married an Indian? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's her reaction. Like, what in the world?
I love it.
And she said, I don't know. And so it was a awkward awkward moment, but here
That
we
was
are.
the last thing I would expect. I would expect you to be completely silent, not say one word after rehearsing the whole day, but you did not beat around the bush.
Well, no, I'm a very fast worker, Anyway.
That was great.
It worked, obviously. We started dating, and we've been together now for
So
over
we
50.
need to know, what did her family think about her marrying an Indian man?
Well, some were not too excited about it.
No.
But her mom and dad were wonderful with it.
That is awesome.
And her grandparents were wonderful with it. I won some real good points because for Christmas, I gave her a present of a Bible with her name engraved on it. And her grandmother said, "That's the man you need to marry."
This is the one. That is so cute. I
anyway.
love romantic stories. That's why I was so anxious to bring you to hear this, because you have told me at some point, you mentioned this story briefly before, and I just wanted to have the opportunity to hear the whole thing, because this is awesome.
Well, we stumbled through things because I still was not familiar with a lot of American idioms and phrases and stuff like that. So, here I am. I'm just very awkward during those dating months, when we first started dating. Like, she baked me a loaf of bread and brought it to the dorm and gave it to me. And I looked at her and I said, you're a very homely woman. And she said, "What do you think that means?" I said, "You bake bread, It says, homely does not mean that in here in America. Homely is ugly and not very attractive." And I said, "Oh, I didn't mean that." I said,
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So here I'm saying, "You're a very homely woman," thinking I was complimenting her. But then on another occasion, I loved Carol's blue eyes, And so I thought, I'm gonna get this right. I'm gonna really compliment her. And I said, "I love your beady blue eyes." And she says, "That's not a good way to say that, Leslie." So it's just like we kept stumbling over stuff. And
I appreciate that she understood the differences in language and culture.
We laugh about it now, but she knew that I was trying to be complimentary, but still.
I go through this with my husband. We're from the same country, but when I came to America, I was around Americans more often than him.
Yeah.
So listen, it's the blind guiding the blind, because I get everything wrong, but he gets a little more wrong than me. So the two of us, sometimes we make some very funny stories too.
Yeah.
So then you guys get married?
Well, we dated through my senior year. And then Carol, of course, continued with her nursing program. And then then she went to Raleigh to, we got engaged just before I graduated from college. But then I went down to Florida to start my first teaching job there.
Okay, that's where you started.
Yeah, but she went home to Raleigh to prepare for the wedding because we had family from India, and we had family that would be coming for the wedding. And
how did you guys navigate the cultural differences, especially planning a wedding and things like that?
Mom and Dad let Carol and her family do that with me, and my parents were not involved in that at all. They said, "Whatever you want, we'll support." And we had an American wedding. We did not have an Indian wedding, and we were fine with that.
You guys had good family that supported you guys.
My parents were very supportive, and my dad said, we realize that this is your home. You're not going back to India. This is your home. And if you found a girl that loves you, and we're happy for you.
I love that. That is wonderful when you have Christian parents that understand.
Now,
that.
my mom was supportive, but she was always a little concerned. Well, how's she going to fit in with us? How is she going to like Indian food? Because mom is always conscious about foods, and she said, "Is she going to like our Indian food? How will she adjust to all of these things?" And over a period of time, because Carol had never eaten an Indian meal, before she met me. And the first time I cooked for her, she thought, I'm going to kill her. You know, she just ate this stuff. She says, do you always eat like this? I said, it's good, isn't it? And she says, you're going to kill me. But anyway, she says, tone it down a little bit, Leslie. Tone it down a little bit on the spices.
On the spices. Got it.
Anyway, but, you know, we, over the years, you know, she's come. It's funny now because my wife says, hey, let's go to an Indian restaurant for lunch. I said, I'm tired of Indian food. Let's go. She likes Indian food more than I do sometimes. You know, it's funny.
Yeah, that is wonderful. I loved the different phases of your life and how God brought you to be who you are today. I want to ask you 2 more questions. One, what do you think are the misconceptions that especially young people have in relation to a pastor or a president of the conference? And how do you think that we can reconcile these misconceptions?
None of us are perfect people.
No.
You know, we're all sinners in need of God's grace. And we're all growing. You know, I'm not the same person I was when I was 20 years old. And I think all of us have a period, it's like maturing and growing up, and you learn and you make adaptations, you adjust to various situations. Pastors are people.
Yes.
You know, and as an administrator for a church, you know, in all of my life, I have never applied for a job. I give God the credit for how He opened up doors of opportunity for me. I've never applied for a job. I've never sought any position. Whether, you know, I transitioned eventually from being a teacher to becoming a principal, to eventually become a superintendent of education, and eventually to becoming an administrator. And so I've held many different roles, but I've never ever applied for any of those roles. I guess in my mind, and I think everybody's different, in my mind, I felt like I don't want to be seeking a position. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, that in a pastor's role, this is God's calling, and this is God's leading in a person's life, not something that I'm going to aspire to get to this position or whatever. So that's how I viewed things. People are different. Other people may have a different perspective on that, but that's kind of how how God guided my life. And I just think that it's important that young people know that God has a purpose and a plan for their lives, you know, and when you pray about it, and when you know, I still go back to that prayer that K.R. Davis had for me when I was a freshman in college. It was such a deep and earnest prayer, praying that God would give me the direction and God would show me. And it wasn't like a voice from heaven or something else like that, but step by step, God opened up doors of opportunity for me. And I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of times we have this generational gap, and it's not only for pastors or principals, but even like the fact that you're older, a younger person look at it and they say, oh, they get it all together. Mm-hmm. And this is why I wanted to do this, because even though we're older today, we were younger once, and we went through a lot of struggles the same way. Yeah. So there's always hope for that young person that is struggling. What advice do you have for that person who is struggling right now, either with their faith, questioning God, or with relationship or friendship? What advice do you have to this young person?
You know, we don't have all the answers. And I think it's important that when someone is struggling, that you seek the counsel of someone that you have a high degree of respect for, someone who is genuine, someone who can give you counsel, because we all need counsel. I don't have all the answers. I need other people. Even in my job, even though I may have a position that is probably looked up as the leader, of an organization, I got to have people that are smarter than I am around me. I need the wisdom of other people's counsel. You know, the book of Proverbs tells us there's wisdom in the counsel of many. And I think that when we seek the counsel of people that we trust, you know, and I cannot emphasize enough the importance of prayer. I believe in the power of prayer. And I believe that when we earnestly go to God and pray and ask him for divine direction, he hears those prayers. It's not like you're all of a sudden going to get an answer directly, but there are circumstances and people that God will place in your path that will give you the direction that you need for your life. And he's done that for me. He hasn't failed me.
Yeah.
You know?
And it may not be the writing on the wall or
No.
this huge thing, but sometimes just that peace that you feel
Exactly
tells you, yeah, this is coming from God.
Mm-hmm.
Elder Louis, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I absolutely loved everything. And getting to know you a little more, this is wonderful. Thank you for being part of Tea Talks.
You're very welcome. It's an honor.